The survey authority's chamber smelled like recycled air and old paper, an affectation. Vethori bureaucrats keeping physical documents as a signal of permanence. Permanence. I noticed it the way you notice the wrong detail at the wrong moment. The way your mind reaches for something small and manageable when the large thing is happening right in front of you. I was there to observe. That was my role. The survey director's name, as best as the translation matrix could render it, was Assessor Prime Vethok Suara. He sat across the table from Commander Hale Oren, who commanded the Dormant Clause's ground detachment, and he was explaining, in the careful, methodical way of a man who believed that explanation was still a viable strategy, that the survey variance events had been filed correctly. The geological survey of the Heron Reach border systems, Suara said, was conducted under Ascendancy License 7 COVA, issued pursuant to the Traverse Accord. All collateral subsurface resonance events were logged individually. The filing is complete. Oren said nothing. Sura set a data slate on the table, SFVE 001 through SVE 06100. Each entry carries a timestamp, a resonance magnitude, and a structural failure notation. The documentation is comprehensive. I looked at my ledger. SVE 001 through SVE 061. I had been rotating through Heron's Reach on a supply run when the domes came down. Dome 7 collapsed first. That is the only thing that gets you out of bed in the morning when you work in this field. The fact that going toward it is load-bearing. Remove it and the whole structure of yourself falls down. Every medic knows this. None of us talk about it. So I went toward it. I pulled bodies for 11 days. Not bodies exactly. Not all of them. Some were alive. That is the part nobody wants the details of. The alive ones, who came out of the rubble in pieces. The ones where your hands know what to do, and your head goes somewhere else entirely, and you let it. Because where your head goes is not relevant to the task. The task is what matters. Dome 3 went at hour 14. Dome 5 at hour 31. The resonance from the Ascendancy survey instruments traveled through the geological substrate in a sequence that the Ascendancy's own models had flagged as a potential cascading failure risk. They had flagged it. They had filed the flag. They had proceeded with the survey. SVE-001 was a worker habitat. 94 people. It fell at 0614 station time. I know because I was the one who documented it, standing in the wreckage with a different ledger, a triage ledger, writing down what I found in the same methodical way Susura's people had written down what they'd done, entry by entry, the paperwork of catastrophe. 61,000 people, filed as survey variance events. Susura was still talking. He had moved on to the Traverse Accord's liability provisions, which capped the Ascendancy's obligation at a surveying indemnity, a number, a clean transfer, a line closed. He had counsel beside him, a secondary functionary who was pulling up citations on a secondary slate, the two of them presenting a case that was, I had to concede, comprehensively documented. It was the most complete paperwork I had ever seen for 61,000 deaths. Oren waited until Sulura finished. Then she said, the dormant clause was activated at 0900 on the date your survey record matched the threshold specified in Article 9 of the Traverse Accord. That threshold is mass civilian death attributable to ascendancy action. Your filing confirms the threshold was met. The clause does not assign liability. It specifies a response. The spirit of the provision. We invoke the text, Article 9, Paragraph 3. In the event of mass civilian death, attributable to ascendancy licensed activity within human border systems, Earth's response force, sealed pending such event, is hereby authorized without restriction. Those events were logged as geological. They were logged as dead people. The room was quiet. Outside, through the chamber's single high window, a slit of daylight, pale yellow, Vethary star. I could see the upper hull of Survey Installation 3 as it came apart. Not explosively, methodically. The Dormant Clause's engineering element had been working through the Ascendancy's 14 survey installations in the sequence they had been deployed, the same sequence in which the resonance instruments had fired into the Heron Reach substrate. Installation 1 had gone at 0900, 2 at 0940. 3 was taking longer because 3 was the largest, because 3 housed the master archive, and because Commander Oren had specified that the archive was to be preserved. We were taking everything. The documentation, the licensing files, the flagged risk assessments, the decision records that showed someone in this building had known the cascade was possible and had proceeded, the SVE log itself, all of it, intact, going into human custody. The Dormant Clause's record keepers had been in the lower levels since we arrived, copying every drive, crating every physical file, the paper, all that permanent paper. I wrote something in my ledger, not the time, not an observation, SVE-001, 94. I don't know why I wrote it, my hands doing something while my head was somewhere it needed to be. Susura leaned forward. His hands were flat on the table in a posture I recognized. Not aggression, the opposite. The posture of someone who has stopped arguing and started asking. The clause specifies activation and authorization. It does not specify terminus. The response ends when Earth determines it has ended. She paused. Not for effect. She was reading something on her own slate. A status report from the engineering element. Installation 4 is ready. We will proceed when 3 is cleared. You will dismantle every survey installation and the relay hubs that supported them, and the Ascendancy Survey Authority's primary administrative facility, which is this building. Oren set the slate down. You will be relocated to the transit corridor. An Ascendancy vessel will be permitted to collect you within the window. Sukra stood up. Both his hands came off the table, and for a moment I watched them, a medic reflex, watching for the thing you have to respond to. But it wasn't that. He was just standing because he didn't know what else to do with himself. 61,000 is... He stopped, started again. The indemnity table accounts for up to 200,000. We are not operating on the indemnity table. Then what are you operating on? Oren stood. Oren's aide stood. I stood, closing my ledger. Article 9. Oren said. Paragraph 3. She walked out of the chamber. Her aide followed. I followed the aide. In the corridor, the Dormant Clause's ground element formed up around us without being called. They had been there, in the walls of that building, in the exit routes, in every room adjacent to the one we'd been sitting in. 890 warships above us, 14 installations coming down in sequence. The archive going into crates, all of it proceeding without raised voices. That is the thing that stays with me, looking back, not the scale. The scale I knew from the planning documents. I'd seen the numbers on paper since before we left. What stays with me is the absence of noise. No rage. No ceremony. The dormant clause moved through the Ascendancy Survey Authority the way the survey instruments had moved through Heron's Reach, systematically, in sequence, with everything logged. Installation 4 was ready when we reached the transit pad. I opened my ledger in the transport and wrote the time. 11:47. Then, below SVE-001, I wrote SVE-06100. Then I closed it. The dormant clause had been sealed for 200 years, waiting for an event precise enough to warrant it. The Ascendancy had spent those 200 years conducting surveys, filing variances, counting everything except the one threshold that mattered. They had been meticulous. So were we.